Gonna be fine.
Hello, world, and welcome to South of Hollywood. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have my very favorite co-host here ever, Juliana.
Hi, everybody. Very happy to be here. Very happy to see my friend Ife again. It's been years. So
Juliana,
it's gonna
tell
be
them
good.
where you're at.
I am in Oakland, California, in Chinatown. So yeah, just living the Chinatown life is awesome.
Oh my gosh, Juliana's so amazing. I wish we could jump right into it, but let's get a cute little warm up.
Okay.
So tell us, what have you been watching, Juliana? Because you're pretty amazing. You've got a amazing taste.
Oh my goodness. Okay, what I have been watching. I watch a lot of documentaries. It's kind of my favorite thing to watch is what I watch when I want to relax, which is kind of weird. Maybe you might be like that too. I know
I
you're.
am. I
Yeah,
definitely am. I am.
yeah. I know. So you know how that's maybe it might be weird. So some of my favorite stuff that I've seen so far, Attica. Have you seen Attica?
Oh yes, by Stanley Nielsen. Yes,
Yeah,
amazing. Yep.
I am a big Stanley Nelson stan.
Stan.
Pun intended.
Yes.
I'm a Stan like big time. So I kind of watch everything he puts out. But that movie really taught me a history of the U.S. that I
That I did
really
not
didn't
know.
know. Yeah, uh,
Yeah.
I thought that was stellar. So that was really good. And it's, if I'm not mistaken, it got an Oscar nomination, did it
It
not?
is. I think it is Oscar nominated. And it was available on Showtime when I actually saw it. So
Yeah, there you
I think
go.
it's amazing. I think people should watch it. It's a history. Again, people are always telling us, "Oh, the police are just doing their job. They're just doing your job." I mean, there is a documented, long-standing history of the police being used to carry out atrocities
That's right.
against the Constitution, against citizens, against
That's right.
our civil liberties, and that's just a fact. Yeah.
It's sometimes it's easy for us to put that idea of like, oh, following orders, and just like blame the institution, or sometimes blame only the individual, as if like, oh, something like the Holocaust would never happen again because just individuals, we just wouldn't get there again. And it's
Mhm.
just not how that works. Those things that work in conjunction with each other. And it's kind of like, if you are not understanding that, like if you don't have a good grasp of how the individual shapes the institution, and how the institution in turn
Thanks.
shapes the
Oh,
individual,
yeah.
then you're going to continue blaming the wrong people, the wrong reasons, and never really fixing the issue. And I thought Attica, it's kind of like a glimpse in history where you see the brutality and the corruption of both, how both individual and institution can corrupt and be corrupt together. So I
Yeah.
thought that was fantastic. I'm happy it got a nomination.
Yes, such a great film.
Yeah.
Truly amazing. Yes.
On that same, so since we're talking about films, I just thought of another one that I actually have not seen it yet, but it's like I'm gonna watch it today, and
Mhm.
maybe we can you can discuss it in the future, or we can chat after and see like what we think. But Frontline, PBS just put out an awesome documentary called American Reckoning.
I think I heard about that.
You heard about that? So it's actually a spin-off of their latest interactive documentary called Unresolved, which was released in the last summer 2021. And the Unresolved tells a story of 150 cases of brutality during the civil rights era. Murder, lynching, not the lynching is not murder, but murder, just like senseless murder, and also senseless lynching,
Violence, yeah.
violence in general. Yeah. And they kind of took a close look on those 151 cases, which was pretty brutal. And you can kind of explore each story and each victim, and kind of how it happened, and it puts on a map. It's interactive, and it's really cool. And as a spin-off of that, they have a podcast with the same name, but they also just released this documentary called American Reckoning, that it's about the murder of Wallace Jackson, who was a leader of the NAACP, and he was murdered during the civil rights era. So it's just kind of like, again, kind of like Attica. It's, a closer look into a specific story to tell a bigger problem. And the way that they went through this, they created this movie, was by finding an archival film that hadn't been seen before from the times, like a primary source documentary made in the 1960s by two documentaries that went down there to kind of cover, two Black documentaries that went down there to cover it. The archive, the footage kind of got lost and was never found, and it was being held in New Orleans at the Amistad Research Center in New Orleans, which I had never heard about. I'm into archives and research and stuff. I had never heard about that. And the researchers went down there, found this movie, and kind of built the documentary around this footage. So I'm very curious to watch it. I want to see, this footage that they found is like a whole documentary that was never seen, made by two civil rights, activists. That has just been sitting on the archive. So I'm happy PBS and Frontline had the resources to kind of dig out and make the film out of it. So I haven't seen it yet again, but that's something that
that sounds fascinating. I mean, honestly, I know people complain about this all the time, but to me, there are simply not enough stories about the Black American history, a Black American experience, about the civil rights movement, about how the Black civil rights movement impacted America's entire trajectory, how it changed everything, how, it impacted everyone. I mean, there's countless stories to be had. I think about the assassinations too. That's very important because, again, that is a very lost history. In this day and age, I am truly baffled by the Republican desire to do away with, let's say, critical race theory, right? Because number one, I know it just makes you scratch your head, doesn't it? It's just like so asinine. Number one, it hasn't been taught systematically in school at any point. At no point has Black or literally there's a book called The People's History of America, right? That book was written in the 70s also, I believe. And that history is literally to this day still not considered canon, right?
And there are no sixth graders out there reading like Fanon,
You're not reading,
it's not happening.
They're not learning about Lumumba, sir. It's totally, that's not what's happening in public education by any stretch of the imagination, right?
No.
In fact, the whole push, the whole movement behind, Black History Month really becoming popular in the 80s and 90s was in response to that history still being kept out of education.
Perfect. Yes.
Still being kept out of schools.
Yeah.
Because Martin Luther King Day did not happen until 83 or something like that. Like it wasn't law until much later.
Yeah.
So people were saying, hey, this history is real. It's a part of America. It's important. It's important. And it's impacting us today, right? We've been saying it's impacting us today the whole time.
Yeah.
And they're still being like, oh no, everything's fine now. No, we're still experiencing these phenomena today.
Yeah. And I think, exactly. Your point is so taken. It's like, it hasn't been taught out there. Someone needs to show it. And if you don't want it in the classrooms, then yes, you're going to have to sit your ass down and watch a documentary.
Documentaries. Yes.
I mean, what else you want? Or you just live in oblivion.
In complete ignorance. Yeah. And in fact, the irony is that the most ignorant people that we are forced to experience today are those who never got a critical race theory lens education.
Yeah.
And became politicians, became our bosses, became the people who, manage public affairs and media and represent, and journalists, and so we're all burdened as a society by them because they can't comprehend that these things are cultural constructs. They are not universals, Yeah.
They make the United States worse by using. I agree.
To acknowledge, and these are facts. These are and in fact, these are things that are considered to have happened in modern history, right? This is not even ancient history. This is considered yesterday.
That's
You know,
right.
the last 400 years of human history are very recent.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is another concept that I don't know if people realize. Sometimes I'm just like chilling out, sitting down, and I think, like the Mayans or like some
Yeah.
other civilizations ruled pieces of land so much bigger and more important than the United States will ever be, and they fell.
Yeah, yeah.
Fell.
Yes, yes. And
What
they did it thousands of years ago, right?
thousands of years ago, and
Yeah,
they went down. So I don't understand how people cannot understand that the United States can go down too, that this
yeah,
empire,
yeah.
unless it's constantly worked on to
Mhm.
provide some sort of
Yeah.
justice and
Mhm.
and you know and a just place for people to coexist, it's gonna fall. Other places have
They've
fallen
done
before.
fallen before, yeah.
It's like, so either you work towards it, you work to make it better, or
Mhm.
people will rise up. Like that is just how things like
That's how they go.
yeah.
So I know I went already on a tangent because I love talking to you. It's
Oh my
amazing.
God. I know.
But that's exactly it. So I've actually been watching a lot of documentaries too.
Good.
And
What do you
so
want?
I'm watching a documentary like maybe every other day at this point. But I am looking recently at like for that reason to have a little bit of balance. So, I'm seeing some of those. I watch Attica, like I said.
Mhm.
But I've also tried to watch some things that are a little more lighthearted, like Summer of Soul.
Oh yes, so good.
And it was so good. I just loved everything about it. I love Mahalia Jackson. I first of all seen Mahalia Jackson. She was like gorgeous. Talk about it.
Really?
Um, and even that realization that again, this is on the cusp of the civil rights movement, right? This is
Mhm.
69.
Yeah.
And the leaders have all, physically been stricken away, or so they thought,
Yeah.
But here these people were where there was an artistic revolution from religion to, let's say, secular. And
Mhm.
it was happening kind of right in this moment of, again, America as a society was changing extensively.
Yeah.
I believe the 1970s actually when well, let me not even say anything, but basically, they were in the midst of war.
Yeah.
There again, the Civil Rights Act has now had a few years to, be taken into desegregation into effect.
Yeah.
But people are still experiencing social segregation, right? And
Mhm.
again, the
Yeah.
hippie movement was, the sexual revolution. It was also Roe versus Wade.
Mhm.
The pill was legal,
Yeah.
abortion was legal. So the
Yeah.
society was just changing really rapidly for people. So for this Black community and culture to be embracing of that transition with this music and this
Yeah.
musical event, and this from religious / pop stars to like funk,
Mhm.
psychedelic, rock and roll,
Yeah.
sexy, just like everything in between. And so I
Yeah.
just love that expression of Blackness that was kind of unfolding right in that moment from the literally from the 1900s into the 2000s, right?
Yeah.
Basically they took us. That's who raised us, Gladys Knight. I was like, oh my God, look at Gladys Knight. Like a 19-year-old girl, like it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
So I really loved it. It was just so beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good one.
Mhm.
Oh man, yeah. You know what else I liked too, and I felt like that documentary was an homage to all of these years of Black culture clearly impacting and influencing American
Mhm.
the overall American history, but always kind of like, yeah, but not really, kind of like
Yeah, right.
never really taking into consideration that American culture as a whole is pretty much the bedrock of it is
Mhm.
Black artists and Black creatives that have been like working so hard for themselves and for their art, and then that gets seeped in. And in Brazil, if you go and think of like back in the day of American music, people would say jazz so quickly,
Yeah.
so quickly,
Yeah.
but never really fully embraced because
Yeah.
of white supremacy or whatever. So I felt like that movie was an homage to a whole century of impact and influence that has been just put it aside by
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and Black people know it,
Oh,
so
yeah.
it was, it was an outward extension of love, to embrace it, but to also be like, hey, once again, just a reminder. But, when I think about Adele, I mean, what is Adele if not copying Mahalia Jackson?
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
She's literally, she's got a little pizzazz, a little, a little sass on it, but, that's what she's doing. She's belting, she's, she's winding, she's going off, that's all Black music. That's Black music. So
yeah. Good. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. People should watch.
So, I like to get into some things that are a little not as good.
Yeah.
I call this our tea time. Where, we talk about things that we kind of are critiquing. So, what about you? What are some things, going on in your industry, your side of the media world? What do you see?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I've been seeing, I am a researcher, kind of like have been for a while now for documentaries and stuff. So I do a lot of archival research and licensing and stuff like that. And I've noticed that there is an increase on the production of documentaries, historical documentaries. And that's awesome, right? Because just now we were just talking about how much we love documentaries and how much we watched. And I think you and I would never get sick of watching a new documentary. I was like, yeah, keep them coming. I mean, no shade on people creating new content. Absolutely, like, go for it. But you and I are also on the more academic side, even our thinking and the things that we want to watch. I love questioning of authority and questioning of, common knowledge. I'm sure you're the same way, and many of the people that watch you are the same way, kind of like always questioning, because we know what's been done in history before. But at the same time, I feel like this wave of anti-intellectualism and anti-knowledge, it's been impacting some of the documentary making as well. So although I'm all for new films, I have been a little worried about everybody creating films without taking in consideration the knowledge of some folks that have already researched that and creating films that reflect other folks, academics or not, but researchers' work. So I say this because I've been taking some meetings and just sitting at some tables, and feeling a lot of like, there is a lot of momentum on the stream platforms to create new stuff. And it's kind of like a Wild West chase for the cash that is being put out there to create stuff without considering folks that have already, work, like have been doing the work. Yeah. So that is on my mind. Now, I don't want to be like the conservatives that we usually critique, that want the pie for themselves. That's like absolutely not the case. It's more like maybe someone else have done that research. Maybe someone else have said this before. Let's go there and just grab those voices and uplift those voices and those professionals, instead of just being like, me and my gang are gonna make this film and we're gonna rock it and it's gonna be awesome, and all we need from you is this like very limited expertise on how I get this one photo license from Getty or whatever. Anything more than that, we got it. And I think it's a problem that it's going hand in hand with the anti-intellectualism and anti-knowledge problem that we're having nowadays, which is like any expertise is taken with such a grain of salt that it becomes almost like
irrelevant.
Yeah. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Like, how do you feel about that? Because you are also a creator. I'm a creator. At some point, if I sit on a table and I wanna make a deal like for a film or something, I just can't imagine creating anything without considering what's been done before, or that.
Absolutely.
How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's that's literally, we call them primary sources, right? We're supposed to be building our research, number one, on primary resources, given our interpretation, possibly our observations, what we've added to that, what we've engaged with from that researcher or philosopher beforehand, and of course citations. And it's a real, you're so right. Everybody is rushing to the cash grab. I did some assistant editor work for somebody that was trying to get something on, I believe it was MTV or something like that. And they were like, oh, we just need cutaways. And I was like, I'm like, oh, did you license? Do you have some material licensed? Or, they're like, oh no, just take it from YouTube. And I'm like, oh no, that's not quite how that works. I mean, okay. Yeah, for the demo, okay, we could grab it and say it came from this source, and but what what are you trying to do? Because to me that just says, oh, you're not really looking, you're not serious, because you don't really have what you need. So I'm just saying, I agree with, I see people rushing to the dash. Documentaries are kind of in vogue, I guess. I mean, there always are, to be honest. But they're definitely they're definitely in boom. And I think people are, and archival footage in some people's minds, maybe they think that's easier. Maybe they think, they start off with the idea that it's a lot easier to just go get a bunch of footage and go through footage and try to.
You are so right about this, Eve.
Yeah.
You have no idea how many times I've heard people being like, all right, so to like calm the footage, how like you need what, like 3 days? And I'm like, 3 days? I'm like, no. You don't understand that this is a job that is like sitting here and watching this over and over again with attention, with purpose. It's not just mindless, like being on my phone and, like, oh, I'm watching this and I'm also tweeting. This is work. And something else. So this is a situation that I've been through not that long ago. I was invited on a table to discuss the development of a documentary. And I just by chance knew a historian that had written a book about it. And I was so sure that the person producing it had optioned the book to make the film. So I was like, oh, that's great. So I'm going to get, and I kept mentioning the book. I'm like, I'm going to, first thing I'm going to do is just go on the notes and just see where they got all those documents. It's so much easier when that's what I'm saying. Someone's done the work. Someone's done the work before you, like almost for sure. Like, I'm not going to say 100%, but if you had an idea, like, just think maybe someone
has checked, and you're supposed to check. You literally have to check. And the person hadn't optioned the book. And so at the end, it was like, so what book you're talking about? And I'm like, well, did you option so-and-so's book? And they're like, no. And it's a whole thing. And then the only way I could convince them that it was important to option this book was because they said, well, if you do, then no one else can make this movie. And, then it's your idea for like 3 or 4 or 5 years, whatever it is, and you can, and then it's yours. And they're like, oh yeah, no, for sure. Then, so can you look into how, and I'm like, dude, you should do this because the knowledge is there, not because it's your idea and no one else will make the movie. So that's when you mention it, that was like one of the first things that came to my mind, because that frustrated me so much as, both someone working in the industry and also kind of involved in academic research. There's so much overlap. Things would be so much better if people would just look for those historians. And honestly, historians are underemployed and everywhere. So I love working for you. Yeah. So yeah. Well, it's funny you should say that, because I think that's my tea time too, is that it's about having a book. I think your best, I've honestly come to the conclusion that your best bet for a real deal, the deal, the break that everyone thinks they're looking for, is to have a book.
Yeah.
And to have a book that you are willing to option into a film or a series or some other thing. Because 100%. The reality is, listen, I have been an independent artist for a long time. Okay. And my intention was always to crack the nut. I was like, whatever art, I don't care. Art is just pouring out of me. Okay.
Yeah.
I am the art. So
Yeah.
my goal is to figure out how to get paid for this because I'm already doing what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So in that pursuit, I found myself in corporate media. Now, whatever you want to say about that, I love it personally. It's
Mm-hmm.
exactly where I belong. I belong
Mm-hmm.
in television development. That's
Yeah.
where I belong. I want to, keep growing in that. But the reality of the matter is people are buying books.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, a pitch is fine, but that's not where the people are signing $1 million check. That's not where people are saying, oh, let's greenlight this deal. No, it's in a book.
Yeah.
It's in a book that's already been written, already been researched, already been licensed, already been bought.
That's 100% right. You're so right.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's the real tea. So I love it that we've telling artists to do it. And I always say, make what you want to make, especially if you're adamant about the integrity of your project and what you're trying to say, then be prepared to go all in. Don't even worry about if you ever get the money. Make it because it's something that you're passionate about and you're willing to invest and give your time and your energy and your heart. Absolutely. Make that project.
Yeah.
But when you're ready to make a living,
take it seriously.
Take it seriously and write a book.
Yeah.
Because that is where you're going to be able to say, okay, not only have I gone through the process, I've been vetted, this story and narrative holds up.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than listening to these people's pitches and you're just like, where is this movie going? What? Yeah. What do you want to make a movie about? I'm so lost. I worked with an artist for a year who refused to accept that just saying, oh, it's about such and such and such and such was not a log line.
No.
That's not a narrative. That's not.
What do you think you are? You think you're Spielberg that you can walk in the room and just say 3 words and here's money? Yeah.
And I was like, that's not a story. You need to tell people what this. You're absolutely right. And if you want funding, again, if you have money and you want to make the project you want to make, by all means, go do that.
Yeah.
I will never stand in anyone's way. But if you need funding, if you're trying to get bought, if you want to sell an idea, then you need to write a book. And go through the process of writing a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. And if you don't want to do that, then, but you still want to make a movie, then you find that book, you find that author,
get on that team,
on that book, and you work together with someone that's already done the work. Instead of starting from scratch with your own half-assed research, which you don't even know what, and I'm not saying like, oh, give academics all the, that's not necessarily it. It doesn't have to be an academic, but someone like, let's just walk together. I think there is a lot of like single runners trying to catch that pot of gold, and it makes it harder. It makes it harder for them, and it makes it harder for everyone that is trying to help them out, and it just makes for lesser content too, in my opinion. Yeah.
You remind me of just the last note on this, that film Jihad Rehab. Did you hear about that at Sundance?
I heard about it, but I haven't
I didn't see it either yet. And I don't know if it got bought subsequently, but basically, it was at Sundance, and it went from like the first night it was like rave reviews, and then the second night it was like, let's be a little bit more critical here. And that was the main critique, that this person was a filmmaker. Well, she wasn't even a filmmaker. She was a vet, I guess, who had access, but she had experience as a filmmaker. So as a filmmaker, she had access to these subjects, but she wasn't, she wasn't a researcher. She wasn't a journalist. She wasn't a sociologist. She wasn't anyone that took a critical eye at what had actually been happening, or even objective for that matter, right?
Yes.
So, that was the biggest critique, was that she didn't work with enough people. She didn't get, maybe even an executive producer with experience who could say, hey, we need to get a writer here. We need to work on what the narrative is here, because, this isn't panning out.
That is exactly right. Oh, it's okay. It's what's the name?
Jihad Rehab, which is already problematic there.
I'm gonna 100% watch this, because it's exactly what I had, like the problem that I have in mind. It's like, it could be so much better if you had just accepted. And I think it might have something to do with control of the creative product, right? I mean, there are many reasons, but I think one of them is like, you don't want to lose any control of what you're creating. So you're just not gonna contact anyone with any authority because that person might come and just tank something that you like or whatever. I don't know. It's dumb.
Which is a part of filmmaking. I mean, every documentary filmmaker goes through that. And the more you go through it, the more you realize, okay, this is an important part. Because a lot of times the things you like are not necessarily don't bring the story together, don't help, don't make a movement, you know.
Yeah.
Especially when you're a beginner and you don't have a critical eye, right?
Yeah. That's it. That's what I like 100% agree. And I'm so happy that there are movies out there still being made now that have that problem, not because it validates, like I wish no movie had that problem, because I don't
it's a problem.
But it just shows that people are paying attention to that problem, right? That people are like, maybe this piece of art could be better, could be deeper and more impactful if we had other voices adding a critical eye, like you said, to this and expanding this, right? Because I don't know, we like films. We don't want to just watch something that is just making like the most superficial argument, because we're
or the surface, the most obvious, you know, or the one that was in the zeitgeist. It's like, I've heard that one. What's yours? What's different?
Exactly.
Well, and that's the other part, because they are chasing the pot of gold. It's an investment to make a documentary, right? And so it's this balance between, do they really, because if you make the investment, then there's no profit. It's just you make the movie for the sake of the story being told. Well, for a lot of people, that's a hard, they wish for a documentary to be profitable, which means, okay, like I said, the archive, which is sometimes significantly cheaper than filming, right? Or doing like what I do longitudinal. So I'm going to film you over, months, years, whatever have you. I mean, that's like, who else can put that amount of money in to a project? So again, it's definitely about financing. It's definitely about what's popular, what's hot, what's an easy sellable film, and we want to get somewhere in the middle.
That's right. That's right. That we can only hope, I guess. We can only hope. That's literally what I've been trying to do. But you said something, you're like about working corporate media, and you're like, I love it too. First of all, I love structure. I love knowing that.
First of all, hold on, let's just come to it now. Hold on, introduce yourself for real, give us the rundown, and then we'll talk about the corporate media, because I want to start from the beginning so they understand how awesome you are.
Oh my goodness, no, I'm totally not awesome, but I have been working with documentaries. I'm sorry. I have been working with documentaries with TV in general for like, oh my goodness, it's going to be like too long. My first job with it was in 2011. So like a decade that I've been working with it, mostly as a researcher. So I worked in production companies, which is why like I brought that up. Like I like the structure. I like working big companies, and I like working, places that are doing serious work, that are not working with quacks, that have some sort of like zeal for their own sake, that they won't associate themselves with, like just someone coming off the street. I kind of like that, just personally. So I worked in production companies for a long time, and then I moved I'm originally from Brazil. I guess I buried the lead.
Yes, exactly. I'm like,
I buried the lead.
From the most beautiful place on earth. Yes.
Really cool. I'm from Brazil, and I'm from São Paulo, though, which is a really cool city. It's not the prettiest, but it's really cool. It's a huge city. It's the biggest city in the country, and one of the largest in Latin America. Might be just smaller than Mexico City, but maybe just a little bit. I don't know. I want to say that it's bigger and the greatest, but anyway, I don't think it is. And then I moved here like 7 years ago, and shortly after that is when I met Ife. But the whole thing is that I moved here, and I had all this experience doing all this stuff, research and development and this and that, and I just couldn't find jobs. I just like, either everyone had that job already and no one would let it go because it's the coolest job you can have. You know that, Ife, because that's kind of what you do. So you know that doing development for TV and stuff is like super fun and super great. So I went to all of those job interviews and I kept just not getting any job. But I kind of wanted to stay on that, like, working with media, working with TV, because I kind of wanted to continue meeting people that were doing those things. And that's when we met. I worked at SDI, which is a translating and subtitling company, which kind of sounds like, oh, the lightest job you can have, which kind of like, actually, the more I watch, the more I'm like, people need these little words here translated to their language, because not everyone speak English. It's like, this is an important thing that we do. It's actually accessibility to other people.
Yes, absolutely. And it actually ticked up in disability for like closed caption and sound descriptors.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at a Netflix screening last week, and I asked to actually use them so I could just test everything out, make sure that they were in line with the actual film. And I was like, wow, I spent years working on these and I never got to see it on the other side. And it was so awesome to be in a theater and see the CCAP and listen to the audio descriptor and say, wow, it really does make it accessible.
Right?
And wow, this is like so important.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that it's becoming much more popular and acceptable to be accessible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. Maybe I didn't have that vision when I was working there. I wish I understood it better. But also, guys, if you've never worked with translators, they are the most vicious people on earth.
It's a factory. It's like,
my goodness. So much of our energy was just, like absorbed by having to like deal with the politics of translators
in the world, around the world, like where they were at, wherever they were in the world. Yes.
Different cultures, different habits. It's like, it's a job. It's a job. So I guess we bonded so well because we were like, my goodness, this is so intense for a subtitling company.
I know. And I'm like, I thought they were, when we first started, Kim was like, oh, don't worry, it's no one's gonna die, and then I was like, oh, are you sure?
Yeah, exactly. That is so funny. But I kind of wanted to stay into like the corporate world because I wanted to stay in touch with what was actually like where the money was, what people were doing. Indie stuff is awesome, and I consume the hell out of it. But it's like you said, if you want to make a living, which I do, I don't want to be old and poor as hell and homeless, right? So you kind of have to give in and then be in there and do the good work from in there.
There you go. That's the other thing. I mean, I made an intention when I actually got to SDI, because I don't know, you look young and beautiful. I'm a little bit older maybe, but when I got to, you're 32.
Yeah, I love it. I'm 60.
You're gorgeous. You're gorgeous. I love it. Yes, I'm definitely. But when I got there, I had the intention that I really wanted to stay somewhere for 5 years to invest in my retirement, basically.
Yeah.
So that was important for me. It wasn't about what I was creating. In fact, I don't even think the last 3 years I even watched anything that they even distributed. Yeah. I literally just was not even watching the content anymore because I was just like, I don't give a rat's ass what y'all make. I am here to get out of this situation. And in fact, it was when I decided, literally when I realized that my 5 years was approaching and I hadn't gotten a promotion or hadn't gotten in any increase in my wages that I actually needed because inflation was real. Yeah. My student loans were real. And at the point that I was like doing a lot of independent work with my corporate job. So I'm like, okay, this is good. Because it's hard to get into freelancing in LA. So I was like, okay, I'm making art. I'm doing things. I'm still getting fellowships. I'm still an artist in residence. Okay, I'm good. I can go back into the creative side. Like I can make that leap and be in corporate, which was like, everybody was like, that'll never happen. And I was like, that's what I need though. Yeah, I have to do it though. Like I have to get a creative producer job that is corporate. I have to.
Yeah. Man, I 100% agree with you. Yeah. It's the safest place.
Yeah, but it's like what you're saying. I feel like I ultimately got lucky because, again, but my heart was in the right place, you know. So I do feel like I landed at a documentary company that does that, and it shares its values that I have, and it produces work that is researched and based on books, and you know, where people are getting equity, you know, and not just being taken advantage of. So I definitely feel like, you know, and I'm not saying that's what other documentary companies are doing either, but it's a fine line because it's still television, it's still movies. They still have to find a way to make more projects, you know what I mean? So you can't just, everything just can't be like, okay. No, these are people that learn how to budget and finance great films. And I just like, why wouldn't I want to be a part of that?
100%. I totally agree. And when I was doing my internship at Frontline, it changed the way I saw a lot of things, because I did have a little bit of that prejudice, you know, like, oh, these people are the establishment. They have all the power and they could change the world, and they won't because of money. And I used to think that everything sucked. And then you go and you work at some of these places, like you were at the Participant, right? Yeah. A Participant, like companies like that, WGBH, who produces Frontline and produces American Experience and a bunch of other documentaries for PBS. Like these places are deeply engaged with like a democratic way of creating content. It's so difficult for me to see establishment, especially in the United States, as any way friendly or respectful of creators. But then you work for one of them and you're like, oh, there are a lot of really good, talented, and good-hearted people out there that really want to option your book. They really want to create your stuff and that really believe in your work. It's like, oh.
I mean, I definitely, it's unbelievable, because it's like, I think, I mean, I don't feel like I didn't realize maybe I did have a bit of that prejudice too, you know, because I always secretly was like, well, I wanted Netflix forever because I felt like it was more egalitarian, honestly. And I was like, oh, you know, maybe HBO, because I feel like their work represents things that I value. But I've thought about like Disney, and I'm like, I just, you know, it wasn't
Disney's one I had in mind. I had Disney in mind.
Yeah, I know some people don't care about things like that, but I actually do. And people be like, oh, like I would never apply to Fox anything, you know, like I just wouldn't. I don't care if they own FX, and I would never apply. I love Nickelodeon. I wouldn't apply. Because they're, you know, just none of that was what I wanted to do. I wouldn't work at MTV now. You know what I mean? Like, that's not to say that they are making great things, because the truth is they do. They have some great departments. They have a lot more money to be creative. And but I think the real bag is what we were talking about too, which is, or what you mentioned about, you know, being at the table. The reality is they did need to diversify. So it wasn't always that the people were malicious and the content that they chose and picked, but it's like what we're talking about. They were looking at people they were familiar with, people that have made books. They were looking at people who had similar values to them. Well, those people, in some regard, are going to be also the same type of people as them. So, I don't know which comes first, the chicken or the egg, but, you know, diversifying those spaces is actually where that critical change that we're talking about comes into play. You know, by actually being there for whatever that is, and maybe, and sometimes being the first one doesn't mean you have the impact, right? You realize, oh, fuck, I can't stay here either. But the next person after you, the people after you, you know, the more people come, you know, the more it opens up. So so tell us, you know, what has that been your experience like, being also, you're a new American citizen, you know, you see the media. What's been your experience?
Recently naturalized American citizen. Honestly, I was very lucky to have met, I think, the coolest group of Americans to ever exist. All of my friends, you included, Maggie, you know, my friends that I met through my husband. It's like the most wonderful bubble. So I am very inspired, and I learned how to be a good American from observing good Americans and kind of like understanding what was the the underlying actual value of the country instead of stuff written in the Constitution by a bunch of slave owners. Um, no shade on the Constitution either. Actually, I had to pledge an oath that I support the Constitution.
And I love the Constitution.
I love the
even
Constitution
with its imperfections. Yes.
Yes, I love, like, no shade on the Constitution, but also it could be better, babe.
Yeah.
So, I think many Americans that I know live a better life than the life that the Constitution asks of them. People that have gone beyond the the duties and responsibilities of what it means to be an American as it was laid out by those guys. So I think that's awesome. Yeah. So that's what, because of that, and this might sound cheesy, and me, and that doesn't come from a cheesy place. This comes from honesty. As a student of American history, I have learned that American democracy and the country, the state of the country, is only a democracy because African Americans, Black folks, and women fought for it. It was not a democracy. The country was not, like, if a country keeps someone as a slave, it's not a democracy. If a country keeps someone from voting, it's not really a democracy. So it was only after the amendments of the Reconstruction and the early 20th century, and then the civil rights in '64, those were the things that made this country democratic. Yeah. It was not before that. It was obviously, right? And that, obviously. Yeah.
No, I really feel like only the last few years that's been an epiphany for me. Mm-hmm. In fact, I've started a campaign where if it happened before '64, it didn't happen. Yeah. They're always like, oh, here were the greatest baseball players of the 19th century. And I'm like, but it was segregated. Yeah. That doesn't count.
Yeah.
Like, we need to really rethink about what we're talking about. Yeah. Because we need to, like, stop this. None of that counts. Mm-hmm. That wasn't democracy, and that wasn't really America, because there could be no America until there was a full recognition of citizenship. Now we could even go beyond that, but I'll just stop. I'll just take it to the '60s. You know what I mean?
We could do a whole new talk just on that theme alone. But my point in bringing that up was that learning that and understanding that made me a student of American history. I've been studying. I went back to school. I went back to Santa Monica College, community college. Woo-hoo! Which I loved. After I left SDI, I actually got some other jobs in production companies, which kind of sucked because I was working with advertising. Boo! It's the worst. It's where the money is, the real money. Like, people make ridiculous amount of money producing advertising, but I just cannot stand the dumbness of the work, to be honest. So I left and eventually went back to school and transferred up here to UC Berkeley, which is why I live in Oakland now and no longer in LA with you, which is why we're doing this online like this, instead of just like hanging out for a beer once in a while, which would be awesome too, but one day. And just recently, so this path of kind of like learning what's up with my new country led me to enroll in a whole damn PhD program at Columbia up in New York. So I'm moving at the end of summer to New York. Yeah, which is kind of insane. I did not know that that's where I was going to end up. I really thought that after I got my bachelor's, I would just find a job in a production company somewhere doing documentaries, doing whatever. But here I am. And so now we're moving up to New York, which is going to be really fun.
What's your PhD in?
My PhD is in American history, 20th century American history. But my research is on African American intellectual history, which is my favorite thing in the whole world. And I
didn't even know this. Okay, this is breaking news right now.
That's true. Yeah. You don't know this. Yes, it's true. My undergrad research was on a radical magazine called The Messenger, which was written by A. Philip Randolph, who would become a big civil rights leader. But this was when he was in his 20s, early 20s, and he had it. Yeah, he was in New York at that point.
Oh, okay.
He was in New York at that point. He had just moved to New York, and he started this magazine up in Harlem. This was like the beginning of the Harlem Renaissance. This is 1917. And it's called The Messenger, and it's a socialist magazine. They called it scientific revolutionary, scientific revolutionary magazine, which just means socialist. That's what they meant. Although my whole thesis was to prove that it meant more than that, but it's kind of what they meant. They meant socialist. They call it scientific because of Marx, and like Marx like talk about scientific, whatever. But yeah, that was my thesis. I wrote on their intellectual thinking, and like radicals they were to the left of Du Bois, like way to the left of Du Bois. They were like way left wing socialist folks. Brilliant writing. Yeah, really, really cool. And it got me really interested in African American intellectual history. I applied to a PhD based on that research, and got into Columbia, probably because so much of my research, it's about Harlem and stuff. And so
yeah, nice, definitely. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Oh my gosh. That's great. So we're going to be ready to option that book. Okay. Make sure you come to us first. Thank you. Thank you.
Right. It'll be 5 years and it's going to be on your desk.
Absolutely. I will develop it. I am your girl. Just call me and be like, Ife, are you ready? My book is finished now. I'm ready. Baby, I got you. You're going to be, we doing it. We ready. Okay. This is how deals actually get made right here. Okay.
That is true. It's building the relationship, the trust, until you're like, I got this girl. I know her. Yeah. I know her. She's legit.
Yeah, we'll get you a director, baby. We're ready. Okay.
God, my dream, like literally, I mean, that's what we've been talking this whole time.
That's what we've been talking about. That's what I'm saying. I am ready. We going to be ready. Well, exactly when that book is done, we are ready. We going to be ready. Okay.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I'll keep in touch.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's so exciting. I mean, that's everything, and that's what I was saying to you, off camera, exhibition too is definitely something I'm into right now. And I feel like, New York, you have a lot of opportunity to try a lot of mediums, to experience, to express their research in a lot of different ways over time, and that all goes into it too, eventually if you want to do something like a film, right, you'll have, not only will you have the research, the experience, the network, but you can be, then it's like coloring outside the lines, right? Then it's like, then you can be as creative as you want, because you do have the structure of a book and you have been a professional in the industry. So that is where the real magic happens. And that's what I'm like, that's how you get to do it, guys. So even though they make it sound like it's a bad deal, no, get it. Work in the corporate industry if you can, because it's a lot to learn. It's a lot to understand. Yeah.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And if you master that, then imagine what you can do as an independent, like if you're a real insider in the industry, in the corporate America, and then, you do it 5-10 years, which is like this.
Yeah.
It's like, it's nothing.
It's nothing.
Then you can come out with some gravitas, and then you can do your own thing, and then you know who to call, and you're going to need an executive producer with some name to do something. You know who that person is going to be. You know what I mean? Like that's how it works. But you don't know this. Yeah.
But you don't know it until you get in the door, because that is how it actually works. Yeah. That's it. And rightfully so, to some extent, because again, if we're a part of that, then that's what we do too. We get to bring in our friends, our network. We get to work with people that we trust. We get to, and by over that, we also have that diversity, because that's what we're doing. We're bringing in those people. So I'm all about that. I'm 100%. I'm ready, girl. I can't wait.
Awesome. Me neither, honestly. Yeah, it's just fun things ahead. Like, I do feel like fun things ahead, which is why I'm like, are we at war? Like, is it going to be a civil war? Is it going to be a war in Russia? It's like, guys, I have so many plans.
Yes, I think about that too. Oh my gosh. I definitely think about that. And not to end on a serious note, but I think about people around the world, and I just say, okay, well, that's why everything I make has to be for the benefit of the world, to make things better, to actually try to make things better, because I don't know if I'll get tomorrow, but I'm going to work for making things better. Yeah.
Leave it better than you found it, right? That's a big theme in my head always too. Yeah.
So we're just gonna push through. We're not gonna let the winds of change move us. We're just gonna keep being determined to victory. Yes. I'm not a communist Chinese. I'm just saying, you know, that's how you got to think, you know.
That's right. That is how you got to think. That's so funny. Yeah.
Well, it's been so great having you. Just lastly, can you tell us how people can follow you, or, you know, anything that you can share in the future, how they can stay a part of your work, support your work, make donations, you know, buy your works, your books, hire you, whatever? How can people stay in touch with you?
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so you can follow me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter more than any other platform. It's gonna be Jules Towers. So Towers, like my last name.
Write it in there too. You can just write it in the chat.
Oh, sweet. All right, I'll do that. So this is my Twitter, but more importantly is that I would love for people to keep an eye out for the documentary that I'm working on right now, which ends up being an indie documentary. However, they did option a book. They are doing the right way. And I am working as an archival producer and an associate producer in general, doing some other stuff for them too. But the documentary is called Thibodeauville, and it is about the late 19th century race massacre that happened in Louisiana. So it was the killing of over 20 workers, Black workers that were working in cane sugar down in Louisiana. They were organizing with the Knights of Labor and white plantation owners that were, you know, feeling threatened by the labor organizing, pretty much locked them into the city and went from house to house, killing none of the organizers, though, a lot of the workers, but none of the organizers, which there's a whole thing behind it. You can watch it in the movie. So the movie is probably going to come out during the summer. Again, the name is Thibodeauville. I'm going to put it here.
Yeah, share that too. Yes.
Yeah. Thibodeauville. Yeah, that's the film. And it's the latest thing that I'm working on that is kind of big, and it's gonna be filled with cool images. This is what I'm guaranteeing you. Cool image and cool footage, and just some important story that is not a cool story at all. It's not a hot topic at all, but it's one of those moments that in history that it's kind of like it gets passed by with other more massive race massacres that happened in the late 19th century and early 20th century. Kind of like, oh yeah, and then there's that Louisiana one, but it's actually, you know, the brutality of it is the knocking door to door, which is, you know, it shows the magnitude of the race problem in the early 19th century. So anyway, it's a really great movie. If you want to see what I do, all you need to do is just see the images and footage on that movie, and I found those and licensed them and do all of that work for them. So.
Yes. Well, that's awesome. Well, I am so excited for your upcoming book, for this upcoming film. Of course, I'm going to watch it. So just let me know.
I'm going to send you.
Yes. And I cannot wait. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been so awesome to have you. We could talk forever. I'm sorry to everyone that it has this long episode, but it was so great. I can't wait.
Yeah, I know we could chat. I mean, and we were chatting even before we started. We could chat for hours after. So thank you so much, Ife. It was awesome. It was so fun, and I was so nervous and shy, but I felt just so comfortable, and I feel so comfortable with you. It was awesome.
Thank you. Hey, well, share it. Hey, because you know you got a sister out there, you know. So when you get to New York, let them know. But yeah, we're gonna talk about that. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Okay.
You can stay online.
Okay.